All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the LetsRun.com Track Talk podcast. This week, we have the prodigal return of Robert Johnson. Christian Coleman is back as well. He's been cleared to run at Worlds. We promised that we'll talk about Alberto Salazar. We didn't talk about him at all last week, so sorry for that oversight. Donavan Brazier is a Diamond League champion, which means Brandon Kidder is going to Worlds. Drew Hunter has pulled out of Worlds, which means Ben True is going to Worlds, so some shake-ups on Team USA. We've got some fantastic Diamond League finals in Brussels this week to preview, including Craig Engels getting into the 1500 final. All that and much more. But let's start. Robert, it's got to be a good day for you. You're back on the LetsRun.com podcast. Ezekiel Elliott has signed a long-term deal with the Cowboys. How are you feeling?
Very excited to be back to save the podcast. I'm sure the numbers were down last week. I did listen to the podcast on my vacation, and there was a number of things that greatly upset me. Weldon threatened to do the podcast again yesterday, and I wasn't back yet, so I said I would do my own podcast. I think that scared him into postponing it a day. So good to be back. Very upset about Zeke. I don't believe in caving to players who hold out like this. Very, very upset. I wanted him to sit out and never play for the boys again.
John, good news. Numbers were up last week from 2 weeks ago when I was off the podcast and Robert was on it. The era of facts, that's all I can say. Also, John, we've been receiving a lot of feedback. Maybe about a month ago, we said go to letsrun.com/podcast and give your feedback. And I actually decided I had never checked the entries. Tons of feedback was received. And here's some samples from that. The podcast is great, except for Rojo. Please get him off. Actually, just kidding. We did get a lot of feedback, so if you want to get feedback, go to letsrun.com/podcast. How about this one? Rojo's insouciance, Galt's perspicacity, and Weejo's humanity are my favorite part of the podcast. I need a dictionary to look up those terms. But that's the type of feedback we're getting. Only one person was negative out of 40 people filled out the form. Detailed reviews. So letsrun.com/podcast to give us feedback. Sponsors plug, guys. If you need certified CBD products, go to floydsofleadville.com. But we now have our own code. Use code LetsRun. This thing is going so well, we have our own code. Use the code LetsRun to save 15% on certified CBD products. You can get tinctures, oils. They have a recovery drink. Don't mess around with CBD products at your local pharmacy. Go to floydsofleadville.com for performance CBD products for runners.
Folks, and if you do want to call in, you can also just reach the show by calling the Let's Run phone number. You can't reach Facebook, can't reach Twitter, but you can reach us. 844-LETS-RUN, 844-538-7786. But let's get back to the praise. John speaks proper Queen's English. Is that what it's called, John? Rojo's insuance? What? And Galt's perspicacity? Well, Weejo's humanity. Weldon is so now about accepting everything. I understand what that is. But what is insuance and perspicacity, John?
All right. Insouciance and perspicacity. I admit, I was an English major and I still had to look these words up. I feel like this commenter was intentionally just trying to, he went to a thesaurus before he posted this stuff to try to impress us. So I don't know if that's worked or not. But insoucious, I think, essentially just means you don't give a fuck, Robert, about, you're very, you have an opinion and you don't care whether people like it or not. You're just going to say it. And I think that's what people like about you. Perspicacity, I think I looked it up and said lending insight or that sort of thing. So I like to think that having a ready insight into and understanding of things. I like to feel like that's an accurate summation of my role on this podcast. So, I think it was a pretty fair comment. But anyway, let's get to another thing we teased in the intro. Alberto Salazar. I'm sorry, our streak was over. We didn't mention him last week, but we have to mention him this week because the Nike Oregon Project just went out and crushed it in the Diamond League final. Stefan Hassan and Constanze Klosterhalfen 1-2 in Zurich last week. Donavan Brazier winning the 800, even though Donavan Brazier is coached by Pete Julian, but he's a member of the Oregon Project. I feel like we kind of have to praise him, right?
You're kidding, right? The reason why I wanted to come back in the podcast is not only did you guys not mention / bash Alberto like we need to on a weekly basis, you also dissed my boy Jerry Schumacher. And in the, it's like red versus blue, Jerry versus Alberto. You got to pick a side. I'm pro Jerry. You guys were ripping Jerry last week on the podcast. It seems like from start to finish for not racing his guys in the Diamond League final or not racing at all. In the grand scheme of things, we're not going to remember who runs the regular season. We're going to remember who runs well at Worlds. if Jerry's guys deliver at Worlds, he's vindicated. And, you're talking about, he's not running the Diamond League final. And all I could think of is, who else isn't running the Diamond League final? It's the Brooks Beast, the Reebok Boston Track Club, Mark Coogan's New Balance team. Basically everybody in the United States, except for the NOP. Yes, credit to them. Alberto, you guys are in the Diamond League final and Worlds. And maybe Derek Thompson. Like, nobody else. The other teams are such JV teams compared to these Nike powerhouse teams that we shouldn't even be debating who's going to Worlds.
Well, I flip it on that, though, Robert. It's like, these other groups don't get the star power that Bowerman Track Club can attract. They have Nike dollars behind them. And I mean, I'll give them this. Look, Shelby Houlihan, I think when she came into college, people weren't thinking in a few years she's going to be the best 1,500 meter runner in the world or one of them. So I give Jerry a lot of credit for that. But Nike can also get better talent for the Bowerman Track Club than Reebok can for the Boston Track Club and those other groups can,
Oh, I agree. And when I was at Cornell, people were like, why aren't you winning nationals? I'm like, because I don't have the talent. No offense, I love my Cornell guys. Yes, I feel like I could coach a world-class athlete. By the way, the 330 guy from Britain,
Charlie Grice.
Mr. Grice, if you want to be coached and you want to make Worlds, I will take you to the promised land. Just give me a call. I will get back in the game. I don't want you to be the modern-day version of Steve Holman. That was another thing y'all talked about. That was huge. I mean, shocking. Anyways. But y'all want to praise Alberto? Go ahead. I mean, yes, a good meet, but can we talk about the massive, massive failure?
I know where you're going, Robert. Men's 5,000 meters.
He supposedly is the greatest distance coach in the world. He's nurtured Galen Rupp from a child to a prodigy. And Mo Farah comes over from another country. He gets him. He can't find another American that he wants to develop up into distance greatness. So he goes over, gets Yamif Kajelcha, already one of the top world distance runners. The guy can't even finish in the top 4 or 5 for Ethiopia in the Diamond League final. Finishes way back and is now probably off the world's team for the 5,000.
Yeah, I think my guess, from what I've read, is that he's probably going to do the 10K. He finished second in the Ethiopian 10K trials, so he's on that team. But it sounds like he won't be doing the 5K. I've also read some of the Ethiopian journalists on Twitter have been saying that Ethiopia doesn't want anyone doubling in the 5K, 10K, so they might not have put him on the 5K team anyway. But yeah, obviously, this guy is the 2-time reigning world indoor champion. He broke the world indoor record in the mile this year. And yet he was only 6th in the Diamond League final. He was the 4th Ethiopian in that field. Can we also give props? Joshua Cheptegei. Guy ran his heart out. He knew he doesn't have the kick of some of these other guys like Gebrawet or Barega, but what he does have is just an enormous engine. So he pushed it from halfway through the race, ran his last mile in 4:03, lost 800 and 2 flat 0.1. I mean, this guy just bowled out. Mad props to him, and a total lack of respect for him. The other guys, do they not realize that he won the pre-classic 2 mile, that he's the world cross-country champion? The idea that they could let him get this big gap is just ridiculous.
Well, I want to know the story behind the story. Like, the Ethiopian Federation, some of these federations, all of them seem to just be so incompetently run that it's amazing. But, the way that race was run was so bizarre to me. The Ethiopians basically all go out in last place. And I felt like Kajelcha didn't want to do what he did last year, which is rabbit that field out and get beat. I think he was afraid about where he's going to finish in the Ethiopian. So to his credit, Alberto or Julian or someone may have said, just don't do the work. Sit on those guys and blow them away at the end. But maybe that messed with his head. They were so far back. It was just stupidity. Were they racing each other? Hello, there's $50,000 on the line. You're trying to save your world spot. I don't know. That was a bizarre race. But to the praise of Alberto, the women in the 1500 were incredible. Hassan, we praised Mir for closing right in 57 early in the year in a 358 race. Here she closed in 57 in a 357 race. What is she going to do at Worlds? I want to see the 10,000 1500.
Yeah, I think that's what everyone wants to see at this point. One more note on Kajelcha. I do think, from what I've seen on social media, he has been a bit banged up this year. He's had a few injury setbacks, so don't know the severity of that, but obviously that could impact his finishing. But yeah, I think Hassan 10K 15, that I know it sort of seemed like a joke when we first suggested it, but I seriously think that might be the best double for her to do.
It was a joke, John, but now it's real, showing everything of substance in the running world originates here. But Robert's comment about Schumacher, and now we have NOPs apparently, and Bowerman and JV clubs. So everyone else sponsoring the sport, thank you for the JV teams you're putting out there. But what? So I don't understand. those JV teams, if they had a guy in world at the Diamond League final, I guarantee almost all of them would send them. So now Jerry gets credit for being a major league team and just not participating in these events. It's much better for the sport if some of those people are running the Diamond League final. But agreed, if they show up at Worlds and deliver, no one's going to care. But for the sport, we need a way to get people to sort of do some of these other events.
Yeah, I was kind of just doing a little bit of a hot take to the Cougans of the world and Chris Foxes. I love you guys. Hey, and you now experience what I experienced at Cornell, and I've always defended coaches. You can only do so well with the talent you have. When Alberto Salazar started his Nike Oregon project and was doing sort of mid-tier U.S. talent, he wasn't beating the world. When he was coaching the equivalent of Weldon Johnson, he wasn't winning the world. So, yeah, I mean, of course they get the best winners. Of course they have the best results. So it drives me nuts when I see these message board threads about who's the best coach, and they debate between the people who are, give me a break. And I actually like Kajelcha. Like, he was my favorite for Worlds. He was undefeated in the 5,000 this year until that race. I would like to see him. I just wish these countries would say, we're going to have one race. This is a trials. We need to get rid of this selection process. All the countries need to have top 3 go, period. I mean, people are complaining, right, John, about the attendance at the British trials. Why would you go to the British trials when the top 2 go in, and then if you screw up, we can still put you on the team? So it's like, okay, it's important sort of, but not really, because if you want to skip it and your name's Laura Muir, that's fine. Like, that just doesn't sell well. You guys are talking about races that matter, races that should matter. Are your national championships. Top 3, and you go, period.
Well, okay, but what about when your federation says you can't chase the standard? Here's the situation we have in the men's 5K at USA's, Robert. We currently have the 2nd placer, the 4th placer, and the 7th placer is going to be our team at Worlds, because Lopez Lemong doesn't have the standard, Woody Kincaid doesn't have the standard, Riley Masters doesn't have the standard. I mean, to me, I just don't understand. USATF, they never provided a good explanation for why they're not allowing people to chase the standards as they did in 2017 and 2015. They essentially blamed it on the timing of Worlds this year, and which just sounded ridiculous because Worlds has just shifted to a month later. It's not like the whole ecosystem around the track and field world changed. USA had their trials a month later to respond to that. So the idea that they're not letting people chase the standard, I mean, Josh Thompson just ran 3:35 in Berlin last week. It was the fastest by an American this year. He's clearly in great shape. He doesn't get to go to Worlds because he didn't have the standard at the time of USA's.
No, I'm all for that. I'm for honoring top 3. If they can go in any sort, shape, or form, they should go, period. It just shows you how incompetent USATF is. But, John, you should be celebrating this. Dartmouth alum Bintru, you are going to Worlds. Congratulations. In case you haven't heard it, Drew Hunter has pulled out this morning. And this actually made me feel good because remember a couple weeks ago on the podcast, I ripped Drew Hunter. I said he looked so bad at the end of that USA race. He was just getting smoked. And I know he did make the Worlds team, but it wasn't like impressive the way he looked. Apparently, an emailer at the time said he doesn't look well. He looks injured. Steve Soprano has it. I should probably prop this guy's name, but thank you for emailing us. And it's come out. He's had a lot of injury problems and is now pulled out of Worlds. So maybe if he gets healthy, he'll look better and have more of a finishing kick. But y'all are talking about, Weldon talked about how Safan Hassan, the 10,000, 5,000 was not even real, and now it's real. This is another thing that's real. About a month ago, again, my number one source, this guy knows everything about track and field. This is a guy that predicted that Donavan Brazier in high school was a better talent than Grant Fisher. No one believed that, and now it's been vindicated. Diamond League champion, Donavan Brazier. Get back to me if Grant Fisher even runs in a Diamond League final in his career, let alone wins it. But, about a month ago, he texted me and said, Drew Hunter out of Worlds. So I called John up and, John, I have a story you can break.
Yeah, I looked into it.
John didn't break it.
At the time, it wasn't true. Drew Hunter, if you read David Monte's article, Drew Hunter did not make the decision to scratch from Worlds until last week. So to report that at the time would have been premature, Robert. I get...
It's interesting. John reached out to Hunter's agency, and one of the people there got back to John and said, 100% Drew Hunter is running Worlds. Obviously, that's false, because if it's 100% and he's now not doing it, this proves that things change. But it also shows you sometimes that, folks, the Let's Run message board, the rumors are actually more true than reality. Like, a person in their head is like, I'm running Worlds, I'm running Worlds, I'm running Worlds. And the reality is, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. So, it's fascinating, folks. Sometimes you don't even know what's truth with your own life. Like, it's kind of like, it's bizarre.
So next, here's the advice to professional runners. Next time you're questioning yourself and you have a major career decision, Go to the Let's Run message boards and you will find the inner source of wisdom that you sorely lack.
The emailer on the Drew Hunter thing is named James Baxter. He just essentially saw Drew running at USA's and was like, I think he's injured. He doesn't look healthy. Did we talk to Drew at USA's after that race?
Yeah, I did. I don't remember him saying that he was hurt, but, I don't think you're generally not going to just come out and admit, yeah, my foot's broken.
I want to give Hunter props for getting fifth at USA's while hurt. It's very hard to run if you're injured. If you don't feel it when you're racing, I feel like your body deep down is not running as fast as it should. But I also want to be on the record for saying, Ben True, if you're listening to this, I told John a month ago, I said, John, you need to reach out to True. He'll go to Worlds if Hunter pulls out. Please make sure that he's training properly for Worlds and not just bagging the season, the rest of the season. Now, he did run the Diamond League final last week, so hopefully he hasn't had too much drinking in the last 4 or 5 days before the news came out, or hopefully maybe Hunter tipped him off that it might be coming, because there's still another month in your season, Ben. I think this is only the second World team he's ever made, right?
Yeah, second one. He made it in 2015, made the final. I mean, Ben True, at least when I knew him, I didn't know him in college, but he didn't overlap with me in college, but he came to visit Dartmouth a few times. Back then, I think he was a teetotaler, so I don't think he's going to go out there getting blasted. I think he'll be fine. But obviously, he got ninth in the Diamond League final, which the place is okay, but he only ran 13:18, winner was 12:57. So I think making the final at Worlds would be good for him. But not, it's not going to be easy.
Okay, guys, enough men's 5K, women's 800 talk, women's 1500 talk. We need to talk about the race of the weekend, and I'm going to do a rare Alberto Salazar praise segment here. Donavan Brazier, an American man, has won a Diamond League final. Do we know think of how big this is. When's the last time an American man won a mid-D or distance final?
Robert, we've never had an American man win a Diamond League title in an event longer than 400 meters. So really, it tells you how historic what Brazier's victory in Zurich was.
Wow. That was asked more as a rhetorical question, and I thought maybe I was getting old and just forgetting things. But, John, this is why I love you. I don't know how the numbers could have been higher without me. Weldon, me and you, we get along so well. The camaraderie. Anyways, the race was amazing. 300 meters into the race, I was watching on an iPad. I took a screenshot. I'm like, these dudes are embarrassing themselves. Look how far back Murphy and Brazier went. And then at the end of the race, they're the victors. Brazier was the victor. So smart, almost gets the American record, wins the whole thing. And I thought it was a perfect race. Not only did an American win, and Brandon Kidder is going to Worlds, so we get a small team into Worlds. And small teams, guys, earlier I was kind of, trashing them. I love you guys. That's what I was at Cornell. You're not going to win the big races without the talent. And they've got some people going to Worlds. So that's fantastic. But not only did Brazier win, I thought Nigel Amos looked amazing. I wanted him to be healthy. I want him on his game at Worlds. He looked amazing. He was on world record pace for 600. At 600, I was like, oh my God, what is he doing? And then at 700, I was like, the bear's jumping on his back.
I got to admit, Robert, he got to 600 meters and 1:14.3, and I'm watching him, and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to run 1:40. This is it. Rudisha's world record. It's going to go down. And then I was like, okay, he looked okay getting to 100 to go. And then, 100 to go. I was just like, oh my God. And Brazier, measured it perfectly. He went out in 50.8, which that's not very fast for a very elite top level 800. So he made up a lot of ground, because remember, the Rabbit went through in 48.2. I think Amos was around 48.4. And Brazier then comes home in 51.9 for the second lap, which is terrific. To run 1:42.70 makes him the second fastest American in history. I'm just so impressed with Brazier's poise and his racing ability this year. You would get to some big meets in the past, and you got to remember, first of all, the guy's still only 22 years old, but he'd get to some of these meets and he'd just looking over his head. Obviously, the Olympic trials in 2016, remember, but then World Indoors last year, remember, he stepped on the line and he essentially got himself DQ'd and then didn't make the final anyway. So to see the poise that he's been running with, he's won 2 Diamond Leagues now this year. He just looks so much more comfortable out there. It's really a credit to Brazier, but also to Pete Julian and Alberto Salazar for getting him comfortable.
John, I'm a little disappointed. You thought you also would give some praise to yours truly. After he won, I think it was a day or so later, I was on vacation. I was rudely interrupted. My Vacation by Jonathan Galt. No, I still get nice texts from John on vacation. John was very excited. He was linking, I think, to an IAAF interview of Brazier. And John seemed shocked that Brazier in his post-race interview said, look, repeated one of my mantras about middle distance running. You only have one move in the 800. John seemed shocked that Brazier knew this, John. It's not shocked. It's a fact. I've told you it's a fact. I don't understand why you doubted me about this, John. So are you going to give me credit now? Do you think Salazar and Julian stole that from me? I wonder where I got that, because I have a couple mid-D theories that I really love, and I don't know where I came up with them, or if I stole them from somebody else or what.
I mean, the NOP they got a sports psychologist, Darren Treasure. Do they need like a race strategy coach? Could that be you? Or Robert, are you secretly on the payroll of the NOP?
No, because he wouldn't have bashed Alberto and defended Jerry at the start of the podcast if that was the case. But
what makes it more realistic?
Oh, plausible deniability, baby.
And then I get Jerry's secrets and I tell him to Alberto.
Wow. We have a mole. Anyway, I do agree with you, Robert, though. Why would you think I disagree? That the 800, I remember reading it, I think, when I was in college. I read that you said you only get one move in the 800. And I remember watching like Hep's finals and all that stuff. And I'm like, this is absolutely correct. It's totally true. You only get one move in the 800. Brazier made it with 300 to go. And it was a pretty long extended move, but it worked. But what I was surprised by, though, is like Donavan Brazier. I remember when I first interviewed him at NCAA's a couple of years, he didn't even know who Jim Ryan was and he goes on to break Jim Ryan's record, the NCAA 800 record. So maybe does he read LetsRun, or was this passed along to him by someone who reads LetsRun, or was the originator, maybe Salazar invented this phrase and Robert picked it up from him? So who knows?
Of course, Johnny leads LetsRun. And speaking of the JV, what's what we called them earlier, small teams. We'll go with these terms for a while until people get pissed off. Like we used to call D3 nationals baby nationals until some people got very sensitive.
Used to? I feel like everyone calls it baby nationals still on the message boards.
But the JV runner of the week, Brandon Kidder, I'm rooting for him. We didn't really piss on him in the recap of the Diamond League, but we're like, hey, a 148 guy is now going to Worlds, because that was what Kidder's most recent result was. But he ran in Berlin over the weekend, 145.9. So second race in Europe since USA's, and big improvement there. And so, Isaiah Harris is running slightly faster, but it's good to see Kidder sort of rounding into form. He's got a month for Worlds, and, he's got a chance at Worlds to do something. It's kind of exciting if you're rooting for an underdog. So good luck to him at Worlds.
Did I hear that right? I think Weldon just said that Brandon Kidder ran 145.9 in Berlin.
No, 335.9, 1500.
336.15.
Wow, Rojo issuing the stats correction. That's my lane, Robert. You trying to step in my territory?
Yeah, so he ran well in the 1500. I'm curious why he didn't run the 1500 at USA's, right? I mean, he was more of a 1500 meter runner, in I guess he was fourth his senior year in NCAAs in the 1500. Then he opted for the 800. But that Berlin 1500 meter was fascinating. Josh Thompson wins at 335.01. If that 01 ends up costing him a spot in the Olympics, it's going to drive me nuts. USATF, please go with the world ranking system. But second place, guys, no one's talked about this, I don't think. Weldon and I's long-lost cousin, Jensen Johnson from India, has run 335.24, a national record for second. So I was all impressed Thompson won, and then I'm like, well, dude, the guy that got second is someone I've never heard of. But I was like, with that name, like Johnson, like, is he like, I was wondering maybe if he was like some guy living in the States, but no, like, he's legit. Like, I mean, I think he was born and raised in India. And congratulations to Jensen Johnson.
Excuse me, guys. Brandon Kidder, 145.9 in Zagreb yesterday.
Oh.
He ran 148 in Brussels on, that wasn't the Diamond League Brussels, it's some other Brussels meet. And then, because the Brussels Diamond League meets this Friday. Then he ran on, I think, Sunday in Berlin, 336.15, and Tuesday in Zagreb, 145.91. So those are two pretty good performances back-to-back with a month to go for Worlds. So everybody, all you JV runners out there, get on the Brandon Kidder bandwagon.
Yeah, and the beasts were all in that race in Berlin. I mean, Kidder 336, Isaac Yours 336, Henry Wynn 337. And also, folks, not a Brooks Beast, an Adidas member, Nick Willis, he didn't get the world standard, but he did improve to 336.99, only ninth in the race, but hopefully that gets him in. We cannot have a world. I liked how y'all talked about that. Nick Willis is the last remaining tie to the beginning of LetsRun's founding. So he's still going strong at whatever age he is. It's amazing. I don't know how he does it. So Nick, I'm still counting on an Olympic medal next year for you. But, some interesting results. And props to the Beast for getting out and racing. They realize, get the times down for next year. We may be going off a world ranking system. Smart moves there by the Brooks Beast.
All right, guys. I can't believe it has taken us, half an hour to get to the biggest story in the entire track world right now. Christian Coleman has been cleared to compete by USADA. He'll be running at the World Championships in Doha later this month. It's a fascinating story. It's a complicated, complex story. Robert, you look like you're shaking your head right now. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
It's a depressing story to me. It's depressing. I've never seen a story where everyone comes off looking bad, like horrific, like as bad as you can be. It's a black eye for the sport. It's a black eye for USADA. It's a black eye for Christian Coleman. I would even argue it's a black eye for Alan Abramson, who helped break the story with some of the details, and he was so pro Christian Coleman. The reality is Christian Coleman is a professional athlete. He's in the men's 100 meters. He's going to be drug tested all the time. He has to tell the drug testers a 1 hour window where he can be drug tested every day of the year. It's not that hard. Everybody knows how to do it. Y'all talk about text messages. I believe there's also an app you can do it on. And the reality is 3 times in a 12-month period, he was not where he was supposed to be for the drug testing. That is supposed to result in a 1-year ban from the sport. A 2-year ban, which could be reduced to 1-year ban. So he did do that. But he's now going to be allowed to compete because one of the tests was done at 8:01 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. So technically, they didn't test in that window. If they don't test in the window, they can't find you. It's a different type of violation. I read y'all's article. It's so confusing.
Here's the situation, Robert. There are 2 types of whereabouts failures. There is a missed test, and there's a filing failure. And a missed test goes down as the date on which the missed test occurred. It means it has to have taken place. A tester tries to find you during your 1 hour window. They can't find you. That is a missed test. If the tester tries to, but they can obviously still test outside of that window. You got to provide some other information, like where you're training that day, where you're going to be spending the night, your residence, that sort of thing. If they try to test you outside of that window, it goes down as a filing failure, and they can't find you. It goes down as a filing failure and not a missed test because you improperly filed the information. It didn't match up with where your actual location on the day. And so for Coleman, the key test for Coleman, he had 1 missed test in January 2019, which we still have not received an explanation for why he missed it. But he also had 2 filing failures. One was in April 29th when he was at the Drake Relays. He said he listed 1 location in 1 state for a training location. He listed another location in another state for his residence. He listed a 3rd location where in reality he was actually at the Drake Relays. So that went down as a filing failure. But the key one here is one that happened on June 6, 2018. He said he was going to be at his home in Tennessee. They show up at his house in Tennessee at 7:55 a.m. His testing window was 7 to 8 a.m. In fact, he was in Eugene, Oregon, getting treatment for an injury. They tried to initiate the sample collection process at 8:01 a.m., which means that because it was 1 minute outside the window, it doesn't go inside the window. It's not a missed test. It's actually a filing failure. And WADA has in their rules somewhere, there's a comment on one of their rules, filing failures are backdated to the first day of the quarter in which they occur. In this case, it was April 1st, 2018. That means it falls outside of the 12-month window with the other 2 tests. And so he only has 2 whereabouts failures in a 12-month period.
But it's like the 10 of the rule. 8:01 doesn't matter. They know he wasn't where he's supposed to be. That should have been that date. Anyways, it just first of all, he's not where he should be. He should be. USAD, I haven't heard from you. I want to be drug tested every day for the next year to see if the contaminated meat thing works or not. I also think that you should drug test Christian Coleman every single day for the next year. I would do it for the rest of his career. We need to crowdfund this. Every day, drug test this guy for the rest of his career. But the other things that bother me so much about this, so we have some rule. How does USADA not know about this rule? And how did it get leaked to the press that they were going to charge him? And then now they have to backtrack. So it looks terrible for Coleman. Coleman for the rest of his life will be viewed like Moe's doorbell, a potential doper. So it's so disgraceful that A, that this was leaked. B, USA didn't know the rules. Coleman is just so nonchalant about these tests to begin with. Like it's just a travesty, really.
I mean, one, I sort of agree. If the rules are it's not supposed to be leaked, it shouldn't be leaked. But I'm all for transparency. If you missed a test, I think it should be public. If you have a filing failure, it should be public, so we can have faith in the system. So we would know beforehand there are these two systems, and because now some people are into, they're like, oh, the 801 test, really, maybe they're just saying it was 801 because this is a technicality he can use to get off. And the whole thing, I mean, you can't make this up. Like, the comment to the rules that says that the filing failures are backdated. That's just some comment somebody wrote in. I mean, it's typed up and it's viewed as official guidance for these rules. But if some person doesn't happen to write in that comment, which to me doesn't seem logical, or you could just as easily say the day you missed the test is the day you missed the test. I mean, he's off by so many sort of twist of the wind. It's just sort of crazy. Doesn't look good for him. I think he's extremely careless. I mean, with two of these, you just got to be more careful. And the whole thing shows him at best to be very nonchalant. And, I mean, it's unfortunate, but he's lucky to be competing at Worlds. And now with Gatlin possibly injured, oh my gosh, like, at least he is running the Worlds.
Wait, what? Gatlin injured?
Zagreb on Tuesday. He pulled up lame with about 30 meters to go. I don't know. I mean, he's 37 years old. I think it casts doubt into how he's going to do at Worlds if he's even going to run it.
More vindication for my boy Jerry Shoemaker. Never ever race. Don't ever race. Don't ever race. You can't get injured. That way you can win. Since with Worlds being in October, the only healthy people left are going to be the three Bowerman track girls that show up and win their gold medals in every event they run. So, one other mid-D mantra that I love, though. I didn't believe in racing often, but mid-D runners, 800, you can race all the time. The best workout is a race, though, so that's one thing I'd be a little bit worried about if I was Jerry. But back to this Coleman thing. John, this is another thing that I thought about. When was the last whereabouts? The third one?
That occurred on April 26th, 2019. But according to Alan Abrahamson's article, that was also a filing failure, which means it should be backdated to April 1st of 2019.
So we have two April 1st, so that's technically not a year. As someone pointed out, though, it wasn't a leap year. So every year is actually 365.25 days. It's 365 years, 365. So it might be within that year. Anyways.
Now we've got the corkboard and all the spider webs up there.
This is my biggest pet peeve, and this gets into the Jerry and Lawson thing. April 26th, and we're only hearing about this on September 4th. Like, what took them so long? Why was this guy allowed to run USAs? They should have notified him right away. When did they notify him?
So they preliminarily told him that he had a whereabouts failure on May 2nd. And then they confirmed that it was a whereabouts failure on July 2nd, I believe. But they didn't actually bring a charge against him until August, after the US trial. So yeah, to me, Rob, I do wonder, like, what is the explanation for the delay on this? What, like, if they knew he had this failure, why are they taking so long to bring something against him?
There's no scientific stuff. Like, you have three missed tests. You should have filed it in April. Like, it should have been the next day. You're banned. We're going to start the proceedings. John, this may explain why he was a jerk to you, USAs, and not entering his interviews. He's running USAs thinking, hell, I'm going to be banned any day now. I mean, this is so incompetent. Like, you need to notify people very promptly, like right away. He should have, I mean, if they were going to ban him, we don't want him winning USAs and then, this was a lose-lose for the sport. Let's talk about something else. It's so depressing.
I just want to say one more thing here. The Athletics Integrity Unit, which is the IAAF's anti-doping arm, they had a chance to appeal this decision. They chose not to today on Wednesday. But I found this comment interesting. David Howman, who's the chairman of the AIU, he said, based on the facts of the case and clear advice about the interpretation of the current ISTI, that's the International Standards for Testing and Investigation, received from WADA, the AIU has decided not to appeal the decision. We note that the ISTI is currently under review by WADA, and we would support a change in the wording to ensure that in the future, filing failures are recognized when they occur and are never backdated. So I think the AIU here is supporting sort of the common sense interpretation that these filing failures shouldn't be backdated, but by the current letter of the law, Christian Coleman should have been cleared and the correct decision was reached.
No, and people are thinking perhaps, I think people have this all wrong, though. I've been bashing USADA. People think, USADA lets off a doper, basically. I've read a lot of comments saying that, I think the opposite. I think USADF tries to catch people. They try to catch stars. They've caught Marion Jones, Lance Armstrong, big names, big fish, Justin Gatlin. And I think they were trying to get him, and then maybe Coleman's lawyers pushed back on this, and then they sort of changed their mind. But it just no one looks good here, really.
But yeah, the whole 12-month backdating thing. You're telling me if January, February, March, April, May, if I'm trying to count my 6 months here, if Coleman, has a filing fair like June 30th, that is, lawyers aren't going to say, hey, it wasn't, and it gets backdated to April 1st. They won't say, oh, sorry, too late. It was more than 12 months. It's just, Alan Abramson said he didn't get off on a technicality, but like people had to like read the very details of this thing, and it is clearly written that way, but there's no way he knew this until his lawyers poured over the fine print.
Yeah, and I think Abramson's piece talked about all the drug tests he passed. I don't care. Kevin Hatzel, the former coach at Toledo, who had to resign a little bit in disgrace after, I think, having a sexual relationship with one of his athletes, he's been back on the message board recently, posting a lot. He had an amazing post. He's like, I couldn't believe that he just admitted this. He's like, I coached, 250 women over my career at Toledo. I didn't sleep with most of them. I passed a lot of drug tests, and that doesn't mean that I didn't do it one time. This is amazing, Kevin. Amazing. I can't believe that you're making fun of yourself. So let's go on to something else.
That's the post of the week. We need a sponsor for that one. Any dating websites out there? All right. How about a little marathon talk, guys? The Chicago Marathon fields came out last week. Yesterday, it was announced that Kenensia Bekele is running the Berlin Marathon, which will actually be during the World Championships. And the other big marathon news, I feel like, centers around the Olympic trials. Came out that Chris Derrick cracked his fibula running the Krim 10-miler, and I don't see how he can be ready for the Olympic trials. He's a cracked bone right now. So where should we begin? Let's start with Chicago. The men's fields are actually just completely loaded. We already had Farah and Rupp, and now we've got an incredible supporting crew there. I mean, winning this thing, it's going to be harder than winning Berlin this year. I mean, there's no Kipchoge in Berlin, but Chicago's definitely the number one marathon for men this year in the fall, correct?
Yeah, and I think it's the first time maybe since we had the Bekele versus Kipchoge showdown in 2014. That was a great Chicago, and then the year before with Dennis Comedo breaking the course record against Emmanuel Mutai. Those were two really terrific Chicago marathons. But yeah, in recent years, I think people have sort of viewed it as the third of the three full majors because New York's a little bit more famous and gets some of the bigger names. And well, I mean, Rupp and Farah have run Chicago the last few years. So I mean, that's not entirely fair. But then Berlin always gets Kipchoge. That's always a hard one to win. But this year, yeah, I think Chicago is definitely the full major I'm most excited for. I mean, look at some of the guys on this list. So you've got Katane Mola. This guy, he ran the fastest debut marathon in history, record eligible course, because Moses Mosop also ran 2:03:06 back in Boston 2011 in the wind aided race. But Katane Mola, Dubai Marathon course record 2:03:34 in his debut in January. That was terrific. Just behind him in that race was Hapasa Nagasa of Ethiopia, and he's also running. He ran 2:03:40 in Dubai. And he's running Chicago. Lawrence Chirono, he's the Boston Marathon champion. Dixon Chumba, he's a past champion in Chicago. Mo Farah, and then Galen Rupp. I mean, that's really... And then Kenneth Kipchoge, who was third in Boston this year. Ben Kuroki's finished highly in majors in London before. Really just a very stacked men's field and a race I'm super excited for.
It's tremendous. I mean, it really doesn't get any better than that. The women's field, I don't know, John... Originally, you were kind of leading with that in your headline, how it's a bit weak, but they do have Bridget Koskei. I mean, it's a really weak women's field, but they do have the best women's marathoner in the world in Bridget Koskei, and arguably the best female marathon in America, Jordan Hasay. So the problem is if you only have two good runners and one of them doesn't make it, you're in trouble.
If Koskei scratches or Hasay scratches due to injury, I mean, it's really... Oh, I think Koskei's probably going to win regardless. If Hasay could beat her, that would be a huge upset. It would be like Flanagan beating Katani in 2017 in New York. But yeah, I mean, the rest of this field, Betsy Siner has the third best personal best on paper at 2:22:56. And she's, she ran really well. She won Paris last year, but she's also had some pretty poor marathons as well. So she's a bit hit or miss, but she does have a decent upside. Madai Perez is next from Mexico. I think she's almost 40. She might be 40 years old, and she really hasn't. She was fourth in Chicago a couple of years ago, but really hasn't done much apart from that in the marathon for quite some time. So this is just not a very deep field. But here's the thing: you make trade-offs, right? Like the men's field's outstanding. The women, they have the best female marathoner in the world right now, Bria Kosgei, who won Chicago last year and London this year. And they've got the top American female marathoner in Jordan Hassan. So they don't have an unlimited budget. Getting Mo Farah and Galen Rupp and Kosgei and Hassan, that'll cost money. And I think, the place where they suffer is the depth in this women's field. But
it's not just a matter of money for the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. Let's give a credit to the sponsors, because there just aren't as many women. Women's marathoning isn't as deep as men's marathoning. So to me, it's the opposite of New York. New York, the women's field is better than the men's field. Here, Chicago, the men's field is much better than the women's field. I mean, look at Chicago. You guys are talking about, there's 7 guys in Chicago this year with sub 206 PRs. New York only has, I think, 3 this year with that number. Maybe it's 4. Let's see. I'm reading our recap from the spring. No, New York only has 3. Now, and on the women's side, Chicago, has 4 sub 223 women? Is that it? Whereas New York has a ton. I mean, New York has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I guess it's not that many more. But, John, you kind of said, they get the best women's, but Chicago does have the number 1 women's marathon in the world in Kosgei. To me, that field reminds me a little bit of Berlin. You guys are praising the Berlin field every year. Berlin, for the men's race, rarely does anything for me, because it's normally, even going back to the Gebrselassie days, it was like a Gebrselassie going for the world record and then nobody else. It was a Kipchoge going for a record and hardly anybody else. So here you have Kipchoge running really well, not a lot of depth behind it. But I think it's good. We're going to have a fantastic men's race in Chicago with some potential spectacular. I mean, watching Kosgei and Hassan, if they run on their game, will be great. And then New York can have a better women's race with a few big men's names.
Robert, that's revisionist history on Berlin. 2017, he almost lost to Guy Adola. Guy Adola was leading in the last 5 miles of that race, ran a debut world record at the time. That was a fantastic race. 2016, there was no Kipchoge, but a great duel between Wilson Kipsang and Kenensia Bekele. I'll admit, last year it was just an all-out world record chase for Kipchoge. And guess what? He fucking got it. He ran 2:01. It was fucking amazing. So I think Berlin, all right, the Berlin fields, I'll give it you that they're not always deep, but I think that shows, maybe Kosgei decides to go out and tries to run 2:16. I mean, that'd be pretty awesome.
And have we talked about the big name in Berlin? Bekele is in Berlin. I just saw it in the message board when I got back from vacation last night. Do we think he's in good shape? I mean, people were saying because the NN Rotterdam team or whatever it's called, the racing team, they put it out, that must mean he's in shape. But don't they always say he's in shape, John?
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about Bekele is look, I think the fact that he's joining the elite field 3 weeks before the race suggests to me he thinks he can do something. I mean, why would he join this elite field with 3 weeks to go until race day if he was hurt or if he thought he was out of shape? He didn't run a spring marathon this year. I don't see the benefit to him for signing up for this race if he's just going to embarrass himself. But remember, the last time he stepped on a marathon course, he kind of did embarrass himself because he dropped out with basically a mile to go in Amsterdam last fall.
But he was still running. Wouldn't he have run 2:08 in that race if he had finished it?
Yeah, but I mean, so why drop out?
I've never understood this, and I guess this is what motivates him. He's obsessed about running fast. It's weird. We criticize Bekele for being obsessed with running fast. I've never understood why he doesn't try New York. He was such a good cross country runner. A lot of cross country runners. He's the world's greatest cross country runner with all the titles he won. A lot of cross country runners do well in the hilly New York course. Why doesn't he try that? But it's kind of what motivates him to run fast. So I criticize him for only wanting to run fast, and yet then I criticize Mo Farah for never wanting to run fast and only wanting to win races. So it would be interesting to see him someday run New York.
It is interesting. He pretty much runs exclusively flat marathons, whereas a cross-country runner, he would be suited, you would think, perfectly for New York. Also in Berlin, Guy Adola, the guy who challenged Kipchoge a couple years ago. I think one good thing for Kipchoge is now the world record at 2:01 is just so far out there that he won't feel the pressure to go after the world record. He can just sort of race it. And I'm thinking that mindset could help him. The previous mindset definitely wasn't helping him. So I think something new can only help. But the real question is, is he healthy? His father time caught up to him for good. So, I don't know. That's that. Quickly.
Wait, I would like to talk some more marathon news. Big marathon news no one's talked about, folks. Eliud Kipchoge, has anyone seen this? CNN breaking the news. Ross Tucker's taking a little slam at Eliud Kipchoge. This came up last night, I think. And, Eliud Kipchoge has compared his upcoming sub-2 attempt to the moon landing of 1969. Ross Tucker, a sports scientist who we've been big fans of his, and he's been big fans of ours for a long time. He has said that is not a good comparison, is too contrived. Here are the quotes from Ross Tucker. Getting a man to the moon involved overcoming gravity. What Kipchoge is doing is taking gravity out of the equation. It would be the same as breaking the high jump record on Mars, where there is less gravity. People within the sport who understand the constraints of what normally regulates or limits performance would appreciate this isn't comparable to the moon landing. The variables are too contrived for this to be regarded as a pure human accomplishment. John, agree or disagree? I love it. I'm not a fan of the sub-2 crap and the cheaters fly shoes. What do you think, John?
I fall somewhere in the middle here, but I kind of lean more towards Kipchoge. And I'm someone who, when it was first announced he was trying breaking 2 in 2017, I was like, what the hell is this? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But look, Kipchoge is so much better than everyone else in the marathon right now, and anyone else in the marathon in history for that matter, that when he won London again this year, I was thinking of the next thing I want to do. I'm like, what do I want to see him do? What would be amazing? Some feat that I could still be blown away by. Well, yeah, he'd go run New York, which he's never run, and that would be cool to see him in there. It would be cool to see him run Boston. But really, the only thing left for him to do is sub-2. And we all know he's not going to do sub-2 under the actual conditions, without the rotating paces, without maybe the slipstream drafting off of the pace car, however much that might be worth or might not be worth. But to me, what really excites me is seeing him go for sub 2 hours. So yes, are the conditions contrived? Of course they're contrived. It's not going to be record eligible, but I think it's still an astounding feat. I don't think anyone can say they watched Breaking 2 and saw Kipchoge run 2 hours 25 and came away thinking, oh, that wasn't impressive, that wasn't inspiring. So to me, sub 2, no matter how Kipchoge, he's not going to be wearing rocket shoes. This isn't some downhill mountain he's running down. Like, he's running behind paces, he's getting rotating drink service. To me, it's not too contrived to not be impressed by it.
Yeah, the CNN article seemed to focus on the shoes. The shoes, they're either not that effective. They're talking about 3%. They're not giving him 3%. Kipchoge's lowered the world record almost exactly 1% off where it was. And, the studies have shown maybe the shoes, the most comprehensive study I saw said 1%. So for me, the problems are when we talked about someone going sub 2 in the marathon, we meant same conditions. Well, now we've changed the shoes a little bit, but then the pacing, the wind breaking, the science out of the first one said that was the biggest difference. So why don't we just go downhill as well? Where do you draw the line? I think they should just try to do it with legit pacing, find the perfect course. This course sounds really good. Why don't they just get a pacer and just see how long they can go? Legit conditions. Obviously, the cheater shoes are allowed. So, and I'm sure Nike loves it every time we call them the cheater shoes. But the shoes, if the shoes were giving him 3%, he'd already have the world record. The sub 2. So I don't know why this focused. Maybe Tucker's on the Nike payroll because the shoes aren't helping him 3%. That's sort of the catch-22 with this. If the shoes were helping Kipchoge a lot, he'd already be sub 2. They're definitely helping.
It's interesting to me because I've never understood the rabbits, particularly when you can have mixed races with men and women. The men could rabbit the women the whole way. Weldon rabbited Paula Radcliffe to 25 miles of a 26-mile race. So I've always thought the pacing, I'm actually think if we're going to have world records, you should have robotic pacing. I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem with him trying to break 2 when the rules haven't been changed. Follow the rules as they are. So we've had a sub 2 hour marathon. Josh Cassidy did one in 1 hour, 18 minutes in Boston 1 year in a freaking wheelchair.
Oh, come on, Robert.
Now, John, you made a good point about too contrived. It's not too contrived. He's still running. But we talked about it. Wasn't I going to sponsor? There's so many events I need to sponsor. I need an unlimited budget. The Evan Jager sub $800,000 race. Was I going to sponsor a downhill marathon? And didn't some rich guy just start a downhill marathon? I was going to get some 205 Kenyan and have him do it. I'm going to still do it. I have 2 weeks. break the record first. It'd be amazing. Under Armour, give me $100,000. I think I can do it. So,
yeah, wait, Robert, you mentioned pacing robots. There's going to be a pacing robot. Have you not seen the lasers? The laser truck from Breaking 2 that we all loved, that green glow in the morning in Monza. It's back, baby. They released these photos from the trial event in Vienna last weekend, and the pacing laser is back. So I count that as a robot in my book.
But by the way, I just looked at John. We can see, again, podcast newcomers, we can see each other as we record this, even though we're in different states because there's an audio. John is sporting like well, what do you call that? I mean, it's a mustache, but it's very old. I mean, I'm shocked. John, are you trying out a new look?
So the explanation is I've been growing a beard for the last, 5 weeks.
Beard?
Yeah, I had a beard for about 5 weeks. I never used to be able to grow a beard in college. I'm 28 years old, and this is by far the best beard I've ever grown, and really the first serious beard I ever grew. And I decided it was time to shave, but I wanted to see what the mustache looked like. This is not a long-term look. I'll probably be keeping it for 2 or 3 days, but I can't believe it took you. We're over an hour into the show. You haven't even looked at me once, Robert. I'm insulted.
John, I made a commitment to my wife when I take my marital vows seriously. I'm not going to sexually objectifying people, male or female.
Don't covet thy neighbor.
To give you an idea of what it looks like, you kind of look like Drew Hunter. Drew, I'm glad to hear that you're hurt. You're going to get your stride back. I'm be a fan. I've been bashing so many people on this podcast recently. I kind of feel bad.
But John said beard. I mean, that means he's on the podcast for 4 weeks and we didn't even know he had a beard.
It was a legitimate beard, all right? You guys may have just ignored me and not noticed it, but when I shaved it off, this thing took half an hour to shave the rest of it off. So, I don't think it's fair to say that I didn't have a beard at all. I was proud of that.
I went to the Yankee Rangers game last night, and I was reminded that the Yankees have a policy prohibiting facial hair. Are mustaches allowed for the Yankees? I'm not sure. Robert, what's our policy for John at the World Championships?
As long as he wears a collared shirt and no flip-flops, he's good to go.
Shit, I'm not wearing a collared shirt right now, and I'm wearing flip-flops. This is... I'm in flagrant violation of the LetsRun dress code.
Let me share a life mantra for, Cornell, we travel. I try to have you dress up for what's important. Not a lot of people wear suits anymore. You don't have to wear a suit, but you want to look respectable, whether it's church or wedding. The Doha World Championships.
All right, final marathon talk. Chris Derrick. Will he start the Olympic marathon trials, and will he make the Olympic marathon team? Go.
Well, he's not going to make the team. I mean, Chris, I respect him as a runner. He had a great collegiate career at Stanford. I think he's been a little maybe a lot injury plagued as a pro, unfortunately. But 3 U.S. cross country titles, certainly a great distance runner. But you got to log the training. You got to be able to run and race and be healthy. And 10th in New York last year. He was the 4th American in that race. So I wouldn't have picked him to make the team even if he had been healthy. But just getting an injury, this is a horrible time. I feel really bad for him. He's running the Crim 10 miler, steps in a pothole and fractures his fibula. And he's doing that, with less than 6 months to go until the Olympic trials. It's just awful timing for him. So I just, having to rehab that and then getting in a build up and then making the team on the day, I think it's just a monumental task.
I loved it. He was so good. How many times was he top 10 in NCAA cross? Was it 4 times, John, or 3?
4 times.
I mean, incredible cross-country runner. He needs to make an Olympic team. It's kind of like a Selensky. I mean, I know he doesn't have the track credentials of Selensky, but this guy needs to make an Olympic team. He does. I mean, if he's out 2 months, John, he still have 4 months. If he's out September and October, he's got November, December, January, and February. It's 4 months. I mean, he was unlikely to make the team to begin with. Still holding out hope, underwater treadmill, stuff like that. I think he'll start the race. But this bothers me. I mean, going back years when he had that Achilles problem and he missed a year, I'm like, he needs to have the surgery. I don't know if he ever had the surgery, but as someone who had an Achilles problem, it always sticks. And I guess he ran into a hole, so this is different. But lawsuit, lawyers, LetsRun. If you want to represent Chris, we can sue the city of, is it Karam or I don't even know what city it is.
Flint, Michigan.
Oh, no. They have enough problems. They need to help those people who drank that lead-painted water.
Chris, you're out of luck. They have no money, man.
All right, shall we move on? Diamond League final number 2. Final Diamond League meet of 2019 in Brussels on Friday. We've got some pretty good distance races going on there.
I'm very excited about this, and I heard last week's podcast, guys. You guys are talking about the Diamond League final. They're going to go to 1 DL final next year. Why? They need to have 2. The Diamond League finals should be like the AFC and NFC championships. They should be before Worlds, and you have two meets. Two big meets is better than one big meet. And I thought the whole thing of their whole dumb marketing revamp of the Diamond League series is, people can't handle more than 90 minutes of track. So they're going to have more than 90 minutes of track to have a Super Diamond League final. So it just doesn't make the marketing idiots in charge of our sport don't understand anything. And on the Diamond League final, the 5,000 was a great race. No one talked about how this was the final 5,000 of the Diamond League. It was not mentioned in the broadcast. So the marketing is driving me nuts. But John, we've got a number of great distance races. Men's 1,500 steeple, women's 800 and 5K. What's the big one for you?
I'm just interested. I'm excited Craig Engels got into this 1,500 final. We said a couple of weeks ago he didn't get to run Paris because he was the best man in a wedding, but he's obviously having a terrific season. He looked pretty good in his race in Birmingham. He looked terrific at USA's. Now he gets to face the best in the world just before Worlds, and he gets a chance at that Olympic standard. His PR is 3:35.32, and I think Engels, we said if he was in that race, where was it where they ran all the sub 3? It was Paris where they ran all the sub 3:32s. I think he could have run 3:31 or 3:32 in that race. So this will be a really good chance for him to test himself against the world's best, but also to take a crack at that Olympic standard. So I'm excited for that. I expect Timothy Cheruiyot will win it. Elijah Manigoy's not running, which is a little surprising because he had been hurt this year. Then he wins the Kenyan championships last week, but he is not running, which cleared the spot for Craig Engels. So that's, to me, is pretty interesting. Then you got Ronald Musagala, who's been running really well this year as well. And Jakob Ingebrigtsen, Philip Ingebrigtsen going for a first Diamond League win. I expect Cheruiyot to win, but I'm excited for that.
Craig Engels gets to have his cake and eat it too, folks. He gets to go to Shelby Houlihan's lake house. He gets to serve his best man in a wedding, fly back to Europe between the two, and still, they say you can't have it all. A social life, an academic life, and running prowess. He's got the social life and the running life, and I guess he's not in school anymore, so he doesn't need the academic prowess. So you can it still proves the axiom you can only do two things well in your life, not all three.
Are we going to start having a weekly Craig Engels part of the podcast? Alberto and Craig Engels. I mean, you guys are obsessed with the guy. It's good to see him in the final, but I think the big news for me is that Manangoy is not running, and I figured if he was 100% healthy, he would run it. I mean, he can win $50,000. Maybe he figures he's not in shape to win it. And the prize money drops off, I think, to is it 20 per second? So maybe a guy of his caliber, he said, hey, let's just get ready for Worlds. But I hope he's 100% for Worlds because we really need that matchup.
Well, I mean, he's an American in the Diamond League final, and there aren't that many of them running these finals. I mean, Johnny Gagarik's also in there. Women's 5,000, we don't have any American entrants. Men's steeplechase, Hillary Bohr is the only one, and then the women's 800 is actually fairly American heavy, so that's the big one with Ajee Wilson, Hannah Green, and Raven Rogers. That's also a big race for Sierra Brown, because if Wilson wins, but if any of those three win, she gets the spot as the fourth member on the team because the US will get 4 spots, but I expect Ajee Wilson, as she almost always does, will win this race, and that would give her a Diamond League title. She's never won the Diamond League before. It would also give her, the bye for the USA. So that's an interesting one from an American perspective is the women's 800. Men's steeplechase, speaking of injured world champions, Conseslus Kipruto is running that race. So we saw he came back in Paris for the Paris Diamond League to book his spot in the final. He didn't look great in that race, but he also didn't. I don't think he looked too bad. He was 5th in that race. He got beat by Soufiane El Bekele, but it's 2 weeks have passed. Has he gained fitness? Is he? I think it's just interesting to get an update on him. And then how does Hillary Bohr, the U.S. champ, handle these guys? We haven't seen Bohr in a Diamond League. Did he run Paris? I got to look that up actually. But he looked pretty good in winning the U.S. title. He looked very good in the Diamond League opener in Doha. This is his first Diamond League since USA's, so we'll get to see how serious of a medal threat he might be.
I think, the American women in that 800 have a great chance. I'd be shocked if one of them doesn't win it. I mean, obviously, really, that means Ajee Wilson, but be kind of crazy. Like, what if Ajee Wilson loses to the first time and it's to, Hannah Green? I mean, Hannah Green, Diamond League champion, or Raven Rogers. I mean, the 800 event is it's just been upended without having Semenya Niyonsaba in there. So it's wide open. And I guess Brandon Kinner was my men's JV runner of the week. Sierra Brown, my women's JV runner of the week. We got to root for her. I don't want to jinx it, but she's got a really good chance of going to Worlds, assuming she's healthy, John. Like, I don't think she's raced since Worlds, so that would really be terrible if she got on the team and couldn't go.
Yeah, I got to take issue with calling these athletes JV runners. I know it's done tongue-in-cheek, but what... Or is it okay because you were a JV runner yourself during your career?
I was like a JV B teamer. These are like real JV runners. We're just sort of saying like not the super big clubs. It's a term of endearment. Like I thought baby nationals was a cool term. I don't know. I just don't take offense at a lot of things. So it's totally tongue in cheek. And also, John, she's for Hoka One One, big sponsor of Let's Run this past year. I had on my Carbon X shoes yesterday. I was feeling that rocker effect. You might want to check them out, people. So another reason to support Sierra Brown. We at Let's Run, we love the JV teams, the underdogs. It's really just the underdog teams. So scrappy Let's Run. People oftentimes underestimate things that aren't all glitz and glamour. Like we're killing it at Let's Run, million and a half unique visitors a month, but people think we're just a blog. So hey, Sierra Brown, if you make the team, jinx. Kick some ass at Worlds.
Well, you said you wasn't sure if she had raced since USA's. She actually did race on September 1st in Bellinzona. She ran 2:01:57, so it's still 3 seconds off of her PR, but it's she's running. She'll take that spot if she gets it.
Yeah, that's good to see. Actually, I'm looking that up too now, and that's her fastest time essentially since the injury. She didn't run as fast this year. I think she ran 1:58 last year. And her best this time, at least, she ran a 1:59 indoors, which is nuts. But outdoors, she ran 2:01.19 in Rabat. And that's when the injury sort of took over. Tried to run Worlds, USA's, and ran 2:03 there twice. So, but 2:01:57 here is a step in the right direction.
So one more Diamond League distance final in Brussels. That's women's 5,000. So you've got the two women who went 1-2 in the 1,500. Sifan Hassan and Coco Klosterhalfen are both running it. Helen Obiri, the reigning world champion, is also there. Remember, she beat Hassan in London, both at the World Championships and the London Diamond League this year. So I think Helen Obiri has to be the favorite. And it's going to be interesting, though. If Helen Obiri just goes out there and beats the pants off Hassan, do you think Hassan just says 15, 10K, I got to do it? Or... does the impact of this race? Do you think how much of an effect will it have on Hassan's decision about what events to run at Worlds?
I think it's perfect for her because, I don't see how if Obiri crushes her here. How is she going to crush her? Normally when they race, it's pretty competitive. It looks like Hassan's going to win, and Obiri somehow comes through at the end. So, and Hassan's in such good form. Like Hassan's in the form of her life right now. If she can't win here, you don't think she's going to beat her at Worlds. But unless she gets spanked, if she gets crushed here, I think maybe you just do the 1,500 Worlds because then the 10K is first, right? So you're not tired, you're just fresh to the 1,500. But there's a pretty big gap between the 10K final and 1,500 final. So I don't see the harm in doubling. But I just think it lets her feel how good. If she looks really good in the 5,000, well, I guess if she wins the 5,000, John, the problem is though, then do you do the 10.5? So I think if she wins this race, you do just the 10.5. And if she doesn't win the race, you do the 10:15. Unless she gets spanked, then you run just the 15.
I think that's probably how I would go with it too. I think that makes sense, Robert. Coach Robert Johnson, Nike Oregon Project consultant, drawing up the racing schedule there.
Yeah, who knew? All these years, Robert's been a secret NOP consultant / double agent. What else are you guys looking forward to? I don't know, quickly in Brussels. To me, I think the men's 400 is what I think is going to be a great one. You got Fred Kerley and Michael Norman. Kerley upset Norman at USA's, so they're back at it. And, less than a month out from Worlds, these things start becoming a really good preview of what's going to happen at the World Championships.
That's definitely the event for me, Weldon. I think of the entire meet, I think that's the best event. Noah Lyles, obviously, he's running the 200. He's trying to complete the 100-200 double. I love watching Noah Lyles race, but it's not going to be competitive. I think the only thing that's interesting is how fast he's going to be. And I think Maybe we could see him in the 19.5s again, but I think really his fastest race is going to come in Doha, so we're waiting on that. But the 400, Norman said he was hurt leading into USA's. He flew out to Iowa. He only decided to run USA's after warming up and going through his run-throughs. So is he healthy now? He said he was healthy after the final, that the injury had passed. So how's the last month of training, 2 months of training gone? And then Fred Kerley also hasn't run a Diamond League in that span. He's the U.S. champion. He just ran a PR at USA's, 43.6. So that should be a fascinating race and a preview of the World Championship final, especially now that we have the news Wade Van Niekerk has officially said he won't be defending his title this year due to injury.
Yeah, some of these sprint races are amazing. By the way, shout out to John. I listened to the podcast last week. John, basically, he did predict the 2 sub-47s in the 400 hurdles happened for the first time in history, although John got the winner wrong, but pretty close, John, to an amazing pick there. But, some of the sprint action is, really quite top-notch. So it should just be, a fantastic meet from start to finish. But I don't understand, again, like the marketing. Like, I know it's not going to make the sport wildly popular, but the 200-400 double, why wasn't that possible for the women, at least the Diamond League final? So the Shani Miller-Uibo could do that. Like, it doesn't take rocket science to figure this out. Like, there's a lot of different scenarios you got to think about, but come on, people, we can do better. And do we want to go to we've talked about professional sports, but I don't think we've talked about collegiate action. And y'all talked about it a lot about this last week. And I'm not sure if I want to go there. Y'all say that, John, what was the word you mentioned that I was described as? That means I don't give a F?
Insouciant.
Yeah, I don't think that's the proper... I Googled that as you were talking about it. That's not what it said when I Googled it. But anyways, I do give an F about this, the transgender case. June Eastwood has competed in her first college meet, and she finished second overall in the entire meet. So, y'all talked about a lot about this last week. Y'all have written some articles about it.
She was second on her team, Robert, not second in the meet. She was 7th overall in the meet.
Okay, second on her team, 7th overall. And I don't know where to go with this. First of all, I have huge personal sympathy for someone like this. It would be so hard to wake up, think, you're born with a penis and you think that you're a woman. And that would be incredibly, very, very challenging. And I've said the same thing about, Caster Semenya is a different situation. But it would be a very hard experience, but she did, and she's handled it with class. So kudos to her to finding her true self. But y'all debated a lot last week, like on what is fair. And to me, I don't know. Like, is it? I don't want to be transphobic, but labeled as transphobic, and this is why I've thought about just avoiding this topic completely. Y'all think I'm scared? I'll talk about anything. I'm scared of this topic. What's wrong with saying nothing's fair? Again, I like to try to sell my liberal friend who was the Hillary Clinton speechwriter to get out of jail so that I don't accused of being racist, but she was a former Division I athlete. And I texted her, I said, like the argument seems to be, well, if June was going to be the 10th person in her conference meet as a man and she finishes 25th as a woman, then is it fair? If you do relatively worse as a man than a woman. And I don't know. My friend write back and says, no, it's still not fair. If you don't have the basics of a real, she uses the term, real female body. Now that's going to be viewed as transphobic. But if you don't have the basics of a female body, meaning the kind of person who makes and sustains infants, then compete elsewhere. So my friend is for the total exclusion from competitive athletics. I think in recreational 5Ks, whatever you want, that's fine. But the problem is we're never going to make it fair. It's going to vary so much for every sport. We're not going to know. We're not going to know. So I don't know. All I know is the NCAA rules are a joke. And, I kind of hope that she wins and dominates everything. Cycle off those pills, flush them down the toilet the month before NCAAs, and dominate. The theory is, though, the reason why they have this year rule is that if you're on the estrogen pills for a year, it's going to suppress your natural testosterone so much that it wouldn't come back that quickly, but I don't know. It's just...
Well, I think the issue you see here, Robert, is June Eastwood and Cece Telfer, who is the women's Division II hurdler who won the national championship, they are supposedly both obeying the same rule, which is 1 year of testosterone suppression treatment. Yet CC Telfer, I think many of us, certainly all of us at LetsRun, would agree it's unfair that she's competing. She clearly had an advantage. She won the national title in an event that she wasn't that good at as a male. But you look at June Eastwood, 7th place in this small invitational in Washington. It's not a result that's turning heads. It's not like she's out there dominating, but she's obeying the same rule as CC Telfer.
Well, first of all, I think there's one big discrepancy between the two that y'all didn't talk about last week. CC Telfer didn't try as a male athlete. She was barely showing up for practice. So the reason why she was able to run just as fast as a woman as a man, well, assuming they're on the same, we don't even know what meds they're on. I mean, we can't even have this discussion. But it doesn't matter. It shouldn't be whether they dominate. If they, as long as they don't win the national championship, it's fair. If they don't, then it's fine. No. Like, she's still going to take a spot from some other woman that was born female from the varsity spot. This person's not going to get to go to the varsity. There's a scholarship. What if every man, I know that people, another friend texted me and said, look, I don't think they're doing this for sports gain, but that's true. Not yet. But if college scholarships are on the line, you don't have to take any testosterone. I guarantee you people will eventually abuse the system. Human beings have shown they'll abuse any system that they can get away with. So, to me, it's just, I don't know. I feel like we're already debating at what level is it fair. To me, the argument might be, should this be even allowed at all? I mean, we're debating like at what level can someone with a penis win? How fast can they be before it's unfair that they're winning women's races?
Steve Soprano, employee 1.1, essentially supports your view. At elite sport, transgender women shouldn't be allowed to compete. And I understand and sort of respect that view. And it's sort of weird, kind of like you said, well, as long as they're not that good, it's okay. So it's like, how poorly does June have to do before we say it's okay? But then, essentially, as we pointed out in the results, she affected the team standings. Another girl's going to get bumped from the travel squad. So I can see how people come down from on a societal level about different things. And then some of these people are sort of joking, but they're like, oh, the patriarchy continues. Now men are taking over women's sports. Some of the people are jerks saying that, but there's some like hardcore feminists who are like, no, like you're invading our space. And I don't think there's a right answer. Just if people can have the discussion with respect all the way around. But I think we're all in agreement, even, Steve and Robert, John and me, that the NCAA rules as are just a complete joke. If you're going to have testosterone requirements, there needs to be a cutoff. And I think for international sports, it's like 10 whatever, 10, I don't even know what the units are. But, you could easily say 5 or 2.5. I mean, it's really, most people, I would say, like, we have to make these transgender women not good enough to win. It's like, it's kind of stupid if you think about that concept. So recreational sport, I think, is a completely different thing, but there's like scholarships on the line. NCAA elite sport, it's just, we're so pure about not doing drugs and not this other stuff. And the sole determining factor, I mean, sure, she has to work and train of how good she is, how much medication is she taking to prevent her from being the runner she was 2 years ago, where she would just absolutely dominate this division.
This case to me is so interesting. Like, modern society is like, I don't know if the word is screwed up or just complicated or what. Like, think about this for a minute. Like, you're not allowed to be transracial. Well, I actually I was like reading like 10, 20 articles this week, and some people say you can be transracial. Some are saying you can't. But generally, you can't be transracial yet, but you can be transsexual. Even though people say race is a gender construct and gender is a social construct, but you can change one and not the other. But think about this for a minute. Rachel Dolezal was not allowed to go from being born white, to become black in the NAACP. Some people said she was, but she was eventually fired from her job. But let's take about the presidential election for a minute. Elizabeth Warren, presidential candidate right now, she was always said in their family, like, way back in the day, a great-great-great-grandmother was Indian, and they were proud of it. They'd always heard this, and they always said, we're part Native American blood, and she was proud of this. And she supposedly, after she got hired, now she claims she did not use it to get a job as a minority, she put it in the faculty handbook. But people have come back about this, and she actually took a DNA test that proved that she does indeed have Native American blood. Now, it was way back, like 6, 8 generations ago, but the family history was true. She's part Native American. But she's mocked both by the far left and the far right from both sides for making this claim. Yet she's actually part Native American. Yet someone who's born with penis, ball, I mean, XY, basically male, can switch to the other side, and they feel that, and I'm trying to figure out like why we accept this, and I think I've come up with some reason why some people certain times it's allowed, sometimes it's not. Is my one other friend says, look, we don't think June Eastwood's doing this. She at least is not doing this to get an advantage. She's doing it, to be true to herself. So the reason why the Elizabeth Warren thing bothers the far right so much is people think she was doing a Native American to get an advantage, to get jobs. It's very hard to get, these faculty jobs. So if you're a minority, it's much easier. So people think, oh, she's doing this to get an advantage. If people think you're doing it to get an advantage, then you're viewed as out. Like Rachel Dolezal wanted to get the job at NAACP, so she's out. June Eastwood, people are like, oh, she's not doing it for an advantage, so it's allowed. But that's not how we should be deciding this. It's a very complicated thing. It's crazy to me. Like maybe. My name's Robert Johnson. Weldon's name's Weldon Johnson. They're both prominent, very famous black African-American people. I mean, I can't claim that I'm going to be black, just because of the name. So I don't know. Like, I feel for June, but I hope when they do this TV series, like, hell, have me on, have Steve Soprano on, have someone on who says, no, this should not be allowed, period.
Well, here's the issue as I see it is, even the people, there are people who support trans women competing at the NCAA Division I level. But the problem is, like, I think anytime any of these women, any trans woman in any sport, anytime they start winning, it becomes an issue. If you're winning all the time, people are going to say she has an unfair advantage. So essentially we're saying, yes, you can compete, but you can't win. You can't be if you're too good, people are going to stop you from competing. And I think that's a fundamental issue because when people start competing in sports, they do it, they want to win. Winning feels good. That's why you run, right? If she's running, she wants to be the best. But if she actually does become the best, there are a lot of people who are going to have a huge problem with it. And that, I don't think that's an issue you can solve.
And this whole, Robert, this transracial thing, I mean, that's just so not common. People being transgender is much more common. I saw up to like 0.5%, which would be, 1 out of 200? That seems way high for me, but even if it's 1 out of 1,000, even how many Rachel Dolezals or whatever have there been? I mean, that's just so unusual to think you're a different race than you are. Whereas like the transgender thing, maybe there's some genetic or chromosomal or the societal thing when you're brought up, you're at a, like gender is more fluid and people are at a match and there's sort of gender versus sex. So I think that's slightly different. Interesting. You mentioned James Weldon Johnson, a prominent African-American. Someone on the message board posted this. There's a project in New York and they said, hey, we should organize something there. And I saw it for the first time like 2 weeks ago. I was going to the airport and it got diverted. And there's a James Weldon Johnson project probably about 20 blocks from my house. So I'll link to that thread. Maybe we will do something there. That'd be kind of cool.
So it's more common. Yes. I'm not saying like, I have great sympathy for these people. Like it would be so hard. Like, yeah, I mean, but it's more common. So it's allowed. What if there's a one in every 100 million people has some genetic thing that makes them think they're another race or they identify with another race? How people say that's crazy. Well, people would have said the same thing about transgender probably 10 years ago. I was going to say 50, 100 years ago. So we don't know. I mean, plus the rules are so lax for their taking. Like you'd have to test them all the time. The assumption against even Caster Semenya is that she was cycling off the pills. The INEOS have made that allegation against her. So, I don't know. I mean, I feel for her as a person, but I don't know. Because we're talking about this. Look at Connecticut in high school. You don't even have to do anything. No treatment, none whatsoever. And you win the state championship and no one's pushing back against that. That's why I'm pushing back against it.
Yes, there are people. Robert, coaches and athletes in Connecticut have pushed back against it. And I think their policy is a joke. You shouldn't be able to just compete without undergoing any sort of
they haven't
testosterone suppression.
Not that many people are pushing back. There's a lawsuit filed by some conservative fringe group. And yeah, but I mean, true or false, they've been going 1-2 in the state repeatedly on no treatment.
Yes. When it's not clear, one of them, I think at least one of them is not doing the treatment. The other one I'm not entirely sure at. But the Connecticut policy is a joke. I'm not disputing that.
But even if they are undergoing treatment, right? Like, which we have more of a problem here because they weren't that great as male athletes, and now as females they're winning the state title. So we just assume that's wrong. I totally see the argument that Steve makes and that Robert sort of makes. It's like, no, maybe it's not fair, period, that you can compete in elite sport. So I think the key all along really is, yeah, there may be, obviously it's difficult, I think, to be transgender and more difficult than person who isn't, I would say, for sure, in society. But you can be treated like respect, and there still can be different opinions on what's permissible in terms of sport, because we have two categories of sport, male and female, and the protected category is female, and we got to protect that class. And you have to draw the line somewhere. And I don't think it makes you a bigot if you draw the line somewhere else than somebody else. As long as, you'll see some of these comments on LetsRun, they're very disrespectful. But a lot of people just want to protect women's sport. They want to protect sport, and they have no animosity towards June Eastwood or any other transgender runner. So it's amazing also how far this has come. And I think that's due to Caitlyn Jenner. Like, just the acceptance of trans people in general has really been pushed along. I feel like that's a very good thing. And it's more people are coming out and saying, hey, I'm transgender. So hopefully as a society, we can, get to somewhere on this, but I don't know. You're never going to make anybody happy. It's too contentious of an issue.
Right. And the problem with modern society, particularly identity politics, if you have a viewpoint someone else doesn't agree with, you're labeled as a racist, bigot, transphobe, homophobe, whatever. So your viewpoint is not even valid. So that's why I almost don't want to talk about this. Like, hell, what if I want to be the governor of Maryland? President, I think.
You're done. You just went off on some spiel for about 2 minutes about transracial.
I'll delete.
Yeah, there's certainly no history in our recent political past of someone saying something outrageous and then being elected to the presidency. That we have no precedent for that whatsoever.
People don't actually. No one recognizes about Trump. One of the reasons why Trump was elected president is because this stuff has gone so far that there's a big portion of the population that is saying no. We've gone too far. Like, we can't do this insanity anymore. Like, we want to have a border to a country and we want to do this and that. And people are like, no, you're racist, bigot, homophobe. So, like, I don't know. It's like, and then now people are so outraged by Trump, the left's pushing the other way. Like, the extremes are on both sides are just going crazy right now. Like, the middle ground is no longer an acceptable place for people to be, at least on social media. So let's talk about something else,
and
guys.
That was Rojo Explains America, brought to you by Floyd's of Leadville.
I think the key was there, at least on social media. The extremes garner a lot of attention on social media. And it's a major problem with all those platforms. All right. To our ultra running fans out there, I don't know. UTMB, one of our... How many majors do we have, Robert? 3 or 4 majors. We didn't really cover it too much. It was Labor Day weekend. They need to schedule these things now Labor Day weekend or Diamond League final, We need to have a worldwide running category. It was this weekend. Robert, tell me who won.
I know it wasn't Killian Jornet. Actually, Courtney Dauwalter won the women's race. I know that much. But I was looking through the results today and I was like, wait a minute. I thought Killian Jornet was the man. He owns UTMB. This is a major. Why didn't he crush this thing? And then I'm like, what about Walden's favorite guy, 50-50.
Jim Walmsley?
Yeah, what about Walmsley? He wants to win the Grand Slam. I think we had 4 majors. Walden got to win the Grand Slam. UTMB, Comrades, Western States, and John, help us out.
Comrades, UTMB, Western States. I thought it was just 3. You had a 4th one?
No, Robert, it was only 3. The triple crown of ultramarathons. Comrades, Western States, UTMB.
Right before the podcast started, I called Weldon up and I was like, wait a minute, Killian Jornet, where's he? Walmsley, where is he? Weldon's like, well, Killian Jornet, I guess Walmsley might be getting, no, the Olympic trials are way off. Anyways, Weldon told me Killian Jornet went for the Pikes Peak record. So a big thing I've realized in ultra scene is people will try to go for these historic records. So he tried to go for that and didn't go to UTMB. But that'd be kind of like skipping London. Oh, I guess it's like Eliud Kipchoge. He skips London to go for some, well, I guess the Pikes Peak record is a lot more obscure than the 2-hour marathon. But
same concept. And then, I see now there's a message board on Thread. So Killian Jornet skipped UTMB to go for the Pikes Peak, Matt Carpenter's Pikes Peak record. He missed it. But now he's going back up Mount Everest because there's some thread with thousands of posts saying that he actually didn't break the summit record on Mount Everest. There's some question about whether he actually did it. So I don't know if he's going to actually try to break the same record he broke before or whatnot. But this will keep people interested. And maybe this one in advance will actually follow it.
Wait, he has the summit record of Mount Everest? That can't be right.
John, where you been, man?
You don't run up Mount Everest, you hike Mount Everest.
John, that's the thing. He did it, and he kicked ass. He went up to the top once and back down, and they couldn't believe it, and then he did it again, and it was like some double record. And there's this huge thing in mountaineering and the Spanish blogs, and some people claim GPS doesn't work that high, but there's like Sage Candidate hinted at this. I think there's a lot of people who think he didn't make it to the top or a false summit or something. I don't know how you get to a false summit at Everest. I feel like it'd be very well delineated, but that's what we're going to get into now, John. After the fall marathon season, we will discuss Mount Everest summiting. It's probably way more popular anyway with the average person.
I don't think it's popular with... I mean, it's probably not... It's just as popular as running. Neither of them are popular, but...
It's pretty interesting because I talked to people about this. Like, he's basically being accused of cheating. And I talked to one guy, he said, well, I don't care. He's so honorable in the rest of his life. I mean, but if he cheated, this is a huge thing. Like... I don't know, but it kind of reminds me of Giannis Chorus. Like when he first came onto the ultra scene, he was so good. People accused him of cheating. And the next year he went back to, I think it was the Athens to Sparta race or whatever that's called, Spartathlon. And people were like, there's no way he ran it this fast. So they had media following him everywhere, and he did it that fast. So, I think that Jornet, I think the first time he did UTMB, he was so good, people thought the same thing, and then he's done it again. So maybe he's just so much faster than anyone else. People didn't believe it. But yeah, Outside Magazine has articles about it. It's pretty interesting. So... yeah, I'll be into that, I guess.
Well, I think that's enough running talk for this week, guys. The Diamond League final is Friday in Brussels. We'll have everything on that on Let's Run. And then Monday and Tuesday, is it, John? We have a new meet on the calendar. The USA versus European duel or something. I'm not sure what the exact name is.
But John has breaking news to report.
I think it's just called the meet, is it not? The match, sorry. Europe versus USA. It's the Ryder Cup of track. And
I will break the news.
Mostly a JV US team, but, there's still a few athletes. Alison Felix is running it. That's one of the names they have. Craig Engels, too.
Let me break the news, folks. Jonathan Gault had been hyping or sort of insinuating the Bowerman track team members might run that race for some reason. I'm not sure why John had that impression. They will not be running that race. So the Bowerman track men will run 0 races between USA and Worlds. And Jerry Schumacher will be vindicated when they show up healthy.
Well, they have, the Bowerman Track Club has athletes running the race. It's not the ones that are running Worlds. And also, I did just see Portland Track just added a 5,000 meter race on September 10th. Not going to say that, Bowerman, I'm just saying maybe a Bowerman athlete shows up in that race. We'll see.
You mean a time trial, John. They're very known for running time trials. So we've got it. We have a new term, the JV runners. We also now have the Bowerman JV. The Bowerman JV will be at the Europe versus USA meet. I think since we're calling clubs JV, if you're not at the Worlds, you're JV. Wow, everybody's silent. That's a good way to end. If you want to give us feedback, letsrun.com/podcast. We're actually now checking that and reading the feedback. Go there. And also, if you need new running shoes, letsrun.com/shoes. Guys, you need to be buying shoes there. Till next week, Weldon Johnson signing off for Jonathan Gault and Robert.